everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to let everyone get situated and then we'll get started. All right. I can see the three little dots whenever audio is trying to function on a computer. So I always like to give it a moment so everyone can hear. All right.
Yeah.
I think we are all set to go.
Aaron.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our documentary webinar today. We're going to be speaking all about our documentary program here at Columbia Journalism School. My name is John Graham. I'm an assistant director of admissions. I'm joined by a number of our amazing colleagues in the admissions staff, and specifically joined by our amazing documentary faculty. And so I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves to you and give a little background about how they got into documentary and just to give you a little insight into what they are like. So June, we will start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm June Cross. I'm founded the program and have been running it for more years than I care to recount at the moment. Let's see, I started the program in 2010. Because I felt that there was we weren't paying, we're very print heavy faculty, and I felt that the visual side of journalism is just getting short shrift. So it's been great that we've been able to develop the documentary program since then, and we've actually also added a photojournalism side to the program, and there's more documentary even in the regular MS. So I want to make clear that this is not the only way that you get to do long form visual journalism, but it is the only way you get to do intensive long form visual journalism and get training in the business and the legal sides and really get prepared to at least you get a foundation in how to do independent documentary, if that's a direction you want to go in. If you want to do web docs for Vox or Business Insider, I'm not sure that you need to do the documentary program. This is really for people that want to spend a whole year, 3 semesters. It's an extra semester. You get an advisor, and we work with you to both develop a proposal, go through the entire process, edit your film. We have an audio mix at the end. So it's much more of a more professional grounding for documentary. How I got into this. I started as a newspaper reporter in Boston. And I'm definitely not going to tell you the year. Some of you have grandparents that are probably my age. But anyway, I started in Boston, and I became I got a fellowship to learn how to do videotape editing, and I worked for a local news station editing local news packages for a while. Always wanted to get in the doc. I went to the NewsHour. I wanted to do long form programming, really, just long form stories. I ended up at what is now the PBS NewsHour. Went from there to CBS and was working at the CBS Evening News, but I really wanted to do longer form. I was doing sort of at that time we had 3 to 5 minute show closer packages. And I was able to pitch a story to Frontline. And that's one of the things we work really intensively on in this program is the pitch process, refining your elevator pitch so that you can do what I did, which is run into the executive producer of a major national news program, TV documentary series in the airport lounge and pitch in 2 minutes and not only sell the story, but I got myself a job. So I ended up at Frontline for the next 10 years or so. And then off and on, I've been at Columbia and doing, the great thing about being here is I've been able to do independent projects. So I wasn't just within one series, I wasn't living in a box of one series style. I could branch out and sort of do more of the work that I really want to do and get to teach you guys too. So I've been raising a guerrilla army, I call you, of documentary filmmakers who go out and do the stories that aren't being done. So end of pitch. Bye.
Amazing. Thank you, June. Thor, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's great to see you. Thanks for your interest in our small and mighty program, our specialization. My name's Thor Neureiter, and I got into journalism through documentary filmmaking. I started out working on historical documentaries in the edit room, editing on film. And then that was not really a sustainable job, editing on film in the early 2000s. It was maybe one of the last, big productions that was edited that way. And then I got into producing, and, over the next 10 years or so, I made a conscious effort to get away from historical, and as June mentioned, frontline, that was sort of the gold standard in my mind of what I wanted to do. And then I was able to work on a number of front lines, just sort of learning the trade from the ground up. And that's how I got into journalism. And then about halfway through my career, I ended up at Columbia doing the MA program, which, if you're not aware, it's a mid-career program for journalists to start specializing on a topic area. So I focused on politics and government. And coming out of that program, my thesis was a film. So I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to get a journalism degree, learn a little bit more about journalism, and just set myself up to start making my own films, as opposed to working on others. So I spent the next about 8 years working on some independent projects, and then also on my first feature-length film, which I finished the year that I joined Columbia, and started working with June as the director of video. And I'm currently teaching, I think, the fifth or sixth class. And I've been teaching with June. I spent a couple semesters teaching with Betsy West. And now I'm really happy and excited to start working with Judith. We've always had Judith join us and do some really intensive workshops in the spring. And if you don't know who Judith is, you need to Google her when we're done. But she really knows what she's talking about when it comes to filmmaking, the business side, pitching your films, developing your films. And so we're really excited. And I guess where I compliment June in the program is I spend a lot of time really working with all of our students on just becoming visual storytellers, and how to really harness how to become technically proficient, and to just get comfortable with all of the processes, the gear. And it's like playing an instrument or playing a sport. You have to do it over and over and over in practice. So that's really what we're doing right now with the current class. And then, I think all of us, we've all made films, and we've done everything from, A to Z, soup to nuts. And so there is a process, and knowing the process and knowing how you can break away from it for your story and following your story. So that's just a little intro to me and the program. And Judith,
awesome. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Yeah. And Judith, our newest faculty member, you could also introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your passion and how you came to documentary.
Sure. I'm thrilled to be here, and I have been working closely with Thor and our students since I started July 1. So I spent the first month kind of supporting the students who were finishing their thesis in that amazing moment when it's sort of all coming together, and it's both like it's creative chaos meets deep collaboration meets trust meets taking this big leap, and seeing all your gut hunches kind of come together, or being forced to have to rework them and rework them and rework them. And that was really a joy and a great privilege, especially during this pandemic, to see what the students have been able to do. And then I've spent the last, I've been August, September, October, up until now, working with this in this amazing reporting class, but with the doc cohort. That's been an extraordinary period of kind of both watching how documentary starts to get fused with hardcore journalism skills that you absolutely need, that you need for hardcore reporting, but you absolutely need for, you know, visionary visual journalism and storytelling. And I come to this really as a documentary filmmaker who was not trained in traditional journalism, but who has become someone who loves more than anything, kind of like this first person, connect the dots, investigative reporting that fuses horror and humor, the personal with the universal, and sort of taking on, you know, really sort of like the big issues of the day, but through very specific channels. So my most current film is called Cooked: Survival by Zip Code, which actually is streaming for free right now, because it was just on Independent Lens this past July on the 25th anniversary of the heat wave, and prior to that in February. And it's a very timely story and totally connects to what we're experiencing right now in terms of survival by zip code through the pandemic. But we've always been living like that. I made a film, you could look for the trailers, called Blue Vinyl, another film called A Healthy Baby Girl. And all of these are sort of all like, you know, striving to kind of explore toxic chemical exposure and corporate malfeasance, or, you know, the scourge of the long-term impact of, you know, materials that are everywhere, but are actually quite toxic along the material life cycle. And my job has always been to kind of like make it personal, make it fun, make it quirky, make it really useful, make it factually sound 100%, but also a great story. And I think that's why I was invited, I don't really know how, starting like 6 years ago or so, through June and Betsy and Thor, to come and do these really, really, really fun workshops on anchor images and harnessing sort of the language of your movie and the language of your heart and soul, and why this film and why you, and start to put it in the kind of package that is necessary in the marketplace. So I'm both a filmmaker, but also a field builder. And as June just threw out, I founded this organization called Chicken and Egg Pictures in 2005, solely to support women nonfiction filmmakers and to address the gender parity gap, and to really create a safe space for women to be able to know and not know at the same time. Because it's possible to know a lot of things and actually be really nervous and not know, which I think when you apply to this program, you're gonna know why you wanna do this, you'll be really passionate, you have this gut hunch, this is what you wanna do, but also you're flailing and you need a program that's gonna make you feel safe. And it's not unlike that when you get out into the real world, which is really hard to believe, that you kind of have to redo this again and again and again, that you're constantly looking for a workshop, a cohort, a community, which is why to start with a cohort and to start in a community, or to land in a community like this, is really one of the greatest benefits and gifts, which I'm seeing play out with the students that I'm lucky enough to work with right now. So I strive to kind of take everything I've learned as a mentor and as a filmmaker and as a funder and fuse it all together when I do my teaching and any kind of mentorship or teaching that I do. And I'm a working filmmaker. So wherever the filmmakers are who are struggling that I'm working with, when I don't have my like, oh, I can help you because I know how to figure out what's wrong with your project, as soon as I'm done with them, I go back to being, you know, a codependent, independent filmmaker who's struggling to raise money for her next project, which I will do as soon as we get off the phone or the Zoom. And it keeps me fresh. And I'm loving the work that I'm doing. I'm a visiting professor, but I'd love to outstay my visit if I could.
What you're saying, Judith, your problem is my problem, or a problem I haven't had yet?
Yeah, my mantra always is, my problem is your problem. You just haven't had it yet.
Yeah.
which, or your problem is my problem, I just haven't had it yet, which speaks to what Thor is talking about in terms of like the muscle memory. So, it's what's great about being in a cohort workshop atmosphere, which you will be, is that you're not just working on your project or your thesis. You end up working on everybody's thesis in some way. I mean, you're a part of the sounding board. You see every rough cut and iteration. You hear them commiserate with you. And it's a little harder now but we do have face-to-face programming. It's not just on Zoom. It's like before you actually pitch it to all of us, you're talking to each other in these interstitial ways, and you're finding, how do you get from this idea in your head and your heart to finding the first language, and then finding the right words, and then learning how those words link to images, and then to the ideas, and then to the facts, and then to the proposal. You figure that out together, even though you're pitching it on your own. And that is something you will always have to do. Like, you will always have to do that as long as you're in this. When you're 80, that's what you'll have to do. And it will always be a little hard at first, but the muscle memory makes you realize, oh, this creative chaos is okay. Like, I have to swim in the chaos before it gets formulated and it works. And I encourage you all to look at June's just released film, which came out a week ago, but you could stream on PBS on the Frontline platform. And I'm sure she was in creative chaos till all the pieces came together. And when you see it, it's stunning, and it totally makes sense, and it's seamless. But there was a moment when it wasn't. And so the my problem, your problem thing is because everyone has to figure out a unique puzzle, and it's totally unique to each of you. And it's an amazing thing to see, but it's also will be a puzzle you will have to reformulate and formulate as you go. And that's why learning in this kind of safe but intense, wonderful space is a great way to learn, because it's not just your problem. It's never just your project. And you get access to 9, 10, 12 other brains. So you're not just working on your project and learning alone. Otherwise, it would be too lonely, but you wouldn't get to exercise the way you need to the muscle.
Thank you so much. And I think that really, that leads into a lot of the kind of conversations we'll be having about the curriculum and what this program is really like at Columbia, because I think it's very interesting and very unique because it is housed in a journalism school. And so I think that's something that a lot of people have some questions about. Come to a journalism school for a documentary program, why not a film school? And so I was wondering, Thor, if maybe you could talk about what it is about doing a documentary program through a journalism school that makes it unique, and why this is, what our approach is at Columbia Journalism School. And then I'll shoot it over to June as well.
Yeah, so you can learn filmmaking anywhere. You can do the School of Hard Knocks and just, learn it by doing it with filmmakers. And what we really want to challenge everyone who's thinking about coming to Columbia is, what's your motivation? And everything that we do, which I think has sort of been hit on, is rooted in reporting, rigorous reporting in journalism. That's the foundation of Columbia Journalism School. And everything has to stand up to that test. And, like I said, I got into journalism from documentary filmmaking, but once I sort of made that connection that the way of verification and just thinking about story, there's a lot of similarities, but what we teach, and primarily the character-driven story, it's a really great guidepost for your story structure and your reporting, and being able to find story through reporting. And I think June and Judith both sort of said, like, you have this 30,000 foot view of this topic area, but you're telling it through a person. So that's what we train you. And our progression, as Judith said, starts off with reporting. And while you're learning reporting, you're learning the techniques of visual storytelling in sort of a low pressure situation. It's learning the tools. It's starting to get comfortable to where you're not fumbling with the camera or spinning your wheels in the edit room, so that once you start working on your thesis proposal in the fall and you have these important shoots with characters or scenes that may be in your film come the next fall, that you feel comfortable and confident, and then you can focus on the storytelling. And in the fall is that arc. Like, you will have a proposal for a film by the end of the fall. It may seem like it's impossible, but it's not. It's definitely, it's something that takes a lot of work, but filmmaking takes a lot of work. And then over the winter break, you actually do get a little bit of a break. We like to add as much as we can to how you report and adding to your reporting toolkit. So we do a 1-week data workshop right before the spring semester starts. We do an After Effects workshop to get your toes wet on how After Effects works. Maybe it's something you want to pursue further. But with like those 2 workshops, it not only adds to the potential of your reporting, but it allows you to talk with other professionals who maybe use those tools every single day. So it just makes you a better reporter and journalist and filmmaker. And then over the spring, you will continue working on your film. You'll be working with your filmmaking partner. You will shoot scenes for your film. Those are sort of the assignments. And everything is intentional to help you create assets for your film, to create a relationship and a rapport with the subject of your film, the community your film is covering. And then there's also, as Judith was talking about, there's sort of like, how do you really think about your film in a way to where you can communicate it to other people, whether that's broadcasters, film festivals, funders. Those are things that you'll take away from the Columbia Journalism School that I'm just not sure that you're going to get in another, like in a film school. You may, but again, all of it goes back to reporting. Like, we think about these things from day one of what is our attachment to a story? Why are we telling it? Why is it important? How do we create a relationship with the people in our films, and how do we do it ethically? It's all the way we look at it holistic. And then by the end of the spring, you'll have like this robust, what's called a treatment. It's a proposal that's really flushed out with a lot of visual material. It's your approach, it's your, for lack of a better word, sort of an artistic statement. You're thinking about distribution, you're thinking about the community and as a whole. And then that just launches you into your production semester, which is over the summer, to we're just working exclusively on your film. And we'll do some additional workshops that will help you along the way, whether it's about thinking about distribution, even more focused on that, or focused on audio post-production. And yeah, that's my 3-minute overview of the academic year. It's a lot, but you know what? It's doable. And we haven't, as June says, we haven't lost the film yet.
Amazing. Thank you.
Most of the teams are excited to continue working on their films after they graduate. And just, we have Sarah Bellingham, who's teaching with me now. She graduated in the class of 16, and she continued reporting on her story with her partner about Trump supporters in 2016. And this is sort of like a 4-year circle for their film. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what they're doing with it. So I'll stop there.
Amazing. Now, June, I think that this is something one thing I learned about the program, and that I really loved, and why I always love, being a part of the process, especially the committee process, is understanding that they're telling the story through a character. They're finding people that they're actually amplifying the voices of. They are character-driven narratives. It's not necessarily a documentary about yourself. This is about another person, another person's experience. And I think that that's really important as something to highlight for the master's thesis, is how to find those characters and how to find your story. And I was wondering if you could speak about that, how people work in a partnership. So that's essentially what happens in the documentary program. They work in a partnership with another person to find a story they want to tell, to find the characters and learn how to interview them. And I was wondering if you could speak about that process, and how you work with students on how to fine-tune that and what kind of topics people have completed for their master's projects.
Okay, that's about 5 questions. So it's okay. Is it the character process or the working in teams process you'd like me to address?
The character process.
Character, okay. So basically, print reporters compile information and then they write a story. And I always say that when a print reporter's job is done is when the visual journalist's job begins. So literally, you need to report your entire story out before you find the character you're going to drive the story through. I mean, I have this film that we just did for Frontline. I was lucky in that I had been to Wisconsin 2 years ago and covered the midterm election in 2018. So I knew of some people from then. And then we did a series of Zoom interviews this year because we couldn't shoot in March. And through that process, we actually found other characters. And it turned out that one of the characters that we found was engaged in, God, I forgot what they call it, when you take like food and care packages to your neighbors, and then you also register them to vote. There's a name for this. I just can't, I'm old, I can't remember the name.
Meals on Wheels sort of thing?
No, it's not Meals on Wheels. There's actually it's a term that organizers use. It begins with an M and I'm missing. Anyway, I'll find it. Anyway, so they were going door to door with sort of care packages of masks and hand sanitizer. And oh, by the way, are you registered to vote? So we found that person because we spent 7 very intense days, and there were 6 of us working about 8 to 10 hours a day, calling people, finding out what their experience had been as absentee voters and trying to register to vote and, waiting for their ballots to come in. So as a result of that, we were able to find the person that we actually interviewed. So now at the same time, USA Today, which is our reporting partner, was working on a separate story. And we were working together and sort of sharing information, but at a certain point it sort of broke apart because we had to go shoot. We needed to shoot something. So we needed people on the ground that we could actually film. And there's a whole process about trying to do that in the middle of COVID and safe distancing and keeping our crew safe and keeping the people we're interviewing safe, separate question. But basically, you're looking for people who, when you talk to them on the phone, they can articulate their circumstance. They sort of have an understanding of why they're in the situation they're in. And they can tell it as a story. Like they have a story to tell. When you sit down next to somebody at a dinner, or maybe you're at a coffee shop, or back in the days when we used to be able to do that, somebody starts telling you a story and you're immediately intrigued. And, those are the kind of people we're looking for as characters. They do need to be able to sort of, express themselves well enough to be able to be heard on camera. And we can edit a lot if they're not, because I do think that there actually is a difference between the people who articulate and put themselves out there and the folks who are sort of shyer and don't want to say anything. And I think there are distinctions between those people, and they're important. And Thor can teach you how to edit, assuming you have shot enough with the person, or have enough of a creative idea about how to cover all the edits you're making, so that you're not, have people jumping back and forth when you're making your cuts, because we don't want to see what we call jump cuts. So finding the characters. So basically in this process, the current class now, I think, is in their issues, they're reporting issues. So generally what we do is we say, okay, so who's interested in these issues? I don't know what they're doing this year, but in past years, what we've done is sort of create reporting groups. So say criminal justice, mental health, health and welfare, those are separate groups, and they all sort of work together on reporting. And then out of that, hopefully you're going to find somebody in that group that you click with, and you form a partnership, and that's going to be your partner for the year. And the two of you then have to like move from that issue-based reporting, which is more like a white paper that you might write for college, into finding a character. And you need to have found that character by the end of the semester. So you basically have, what, 11 weeks? Less than 11 weeks, actually, by the time we're done, because all these other things keep interfering. But basically, you need to have a proposal with a sizzle reel or a trailer reel, pitch reel, what do they call it now? Proof of concept.
Proof of
A
concept.
proof of concept reel that demonstrates who your character is. We can hear them talk. We send that proposal out to a team of 6 or 7 readers, and they give it a grade. And based on that, we choose the winning proposals, and then everybody in the class is expected to work on that together.
Amazing.
I'll
Yeah,
add
Judith?
something. You know, I've just been co-teaching with Joanne in the reporting class, and you know, it basically starts with a beat memo, and everyone is responsible for creating a beat memo where you decide this is where, you know, this is where this is the neighborhood I'm gonna understand, this is the zip code I'm gonna understand, this is the thing I'm gonna do. And perhaps in years past, the beat might be an issue, right? So it could be my beat is going to be City Hall, and my beat is going to be education, or my beat is going to be X, is going to be, you know, a thing, right? But this year, because of COVID, it was decided that your beat is where you live, and it's like it's within a 4-block radius of where you live, to kind of keep it grounded. And so people had to go out and kind of walk the circumference of where they live. They had to, you know, learn how to do the data research so that they could understand the socioeconomic levels of where people lived. They had to understand demography. They had to understand all sorts of stuff. Then they had to go and kind of scope out all the little stores. They had to talk to people. They had to find characters. They had to take pictures of people and find out, you know, take X number of photographs and to ask people all the same question, you know, what are you most afraid of right now? And like learn how to do these interviews. And in the process of the beat memo and then all the subsequent reporting exercises, people really started to meet people, and they really started to find, you know, they were forced to have to deal with an issue, but along the way, they found these great characters. And so in the backs of their minds, they're thinking, what's going to be my enterprise story? What's going to be the big story that I write? And I don't know how many times people have jumped from their enterprise story to their thesis, but it's been extraordinary to watch all this really, really deep, all these deep skills that, you know, I've taught at NYU for 7 years. I teach at SVA right now at the same time while I'm teaching at Columbia, taught at Wayne State University. I've taught at, I've done some really, really interesting, intense work with the environmental program in at UW-Madison. And what I've actually come to see is that the straight film school, which I taught at for 7 years, the best students there were always the students who had, in my mind, who were co-majoring in something, because they were forced to have to create like very, very deep research skills in something at the same time that they were learning their film skills. And the students who'd never picked up a camera before at Madison were extraordinary because they were graduate students who had this deep understanding of the environmental justice and really knew what they wanted to do. So I think that the documentary students who get this reporting edge have an edge over straight doc students who don't, because these skills are so critical and so transferable. So once you go out into the world, like being able to write and think and dive down really deep in a critical fashion, and then come up and be able to turn that into metaphorical visual language and understand how to do both, and understand how to write for the ear and write for picture, is an amazing training that so many people don't have. So I've been really excited to see how someone takes their beat memo and it evolves into a character-driven story by the end of the year.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Thor, do you have any past master's projects that people have worked on that stand out to in your mind? Anything that was really interesting to you? Oh, I think you're muted.
I was holding the space bar down and I had to like do the real unmute. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, we, one of our sayings is we don't want you to make simply a thesis. We want you to make a film. We want you to make a film that you're proud of and one that you want to continue working on. One, you want to put the effort into finding an audience, a wide audience, and get it out into the world. I mean, there's one of from the class of 19, Hui and Kelly, they were so dead set on making their short into a feature length, which they did. They got into some editing workshops. They got into 2 really good editing workshops, and they did make a feature. And I was watching their Q&A this weekend at the I forget the name of the film festival, but they were doing a Q&A. They've been in a number of festivals. I think they're on the cusp of signing a distribution deal for.
Which film is it for?
It's Curtain Up.
Curtain Up. Oh, it's great. Yeah.
And so, and then at the same time, that same class, like, so they're doing great. And then in the same class, there was another film about PTSD of Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans, and they've been in probably 30 film festivals in 1 year. Hui and Kelly are in a number of festivals. Or the class of 20, which most of them just finished in August. One of them already signed a distribution deal with Mountain Public Broadcasting, the PBS stations in Colorado. And then we've had some really, we've had a lot of films that do the film festival circuits. We've had, Frontline films sold to Netflix. Number of them have been on America Reframed. And we've had 2 films win a Student Academy Award. And we've had a BAFTA award-winning film. The second Student Academy Award and the first BAFTA were both from the class of 18, 2 different films. So they were, pretty high achievers in that realm. But and then I don't know, I can keep going on and on. There are a lot of opportunities.
Also,
Can you make your film a short and publish it on, like, the New Yorker? Guanajuato Norte was the BAFTA award winner. It was published at the New Yorker this past summer. So I don't know. I mean, it's all about your story, obviously. A little bit is catching lightning in a bottle, but majority of it is hard work. Because luck only comes when you're ready for it and you're prepared.
Excellent.
I was just
June, what
going
were
to
you
add, I mean, we do also have people who have like gone off and started their own careers. We have one person who's making her second film. She sold her first film to Netflix and she's just got her second one commissioned. I think also for Netflix. We have people who are working with established filmmakers now as associate producers. We have folks who are at the networks. Actually, at ABC, they have 6 digital reporters, and 4 of the digital reporters are graduates of the doc program. So it's not all about being an independent producer and figuring out like how am I going to support myself as an independent. There's several different ways that you can sustain yourself after you come out of this program. It's not all about just the festivals, although festivals are important because they give you a way to spread your calling card. But we have people, we have people who are correspondents now at the networks who came out of the doc program. So it's not one road. You really have to create your own path. Very much create your own path.
I think the other thing that you have the opportunity to do as a doc filmmaker is also, there's a chance to learn about podcasting. There's a chance to learn about multimedia projects so that there's a way for you to do that short, which is an extraordinary calling card, but then really have the skill set to be able to evolve it into a couple of different things, which is really quite critical, especially, especially now, being able to do those things. I'm gonna just give you a link to the last film. There's 4 films that got pitched at Double Exposure at a film festival that actually brought a lot of the filmmakers to participate, a lot of the students to participate in. And the last one came out of June and Betsy and Thor's class last year. This really beautiful film about called Homeschooled. So it's a great character study about a family who's suffering with housing instability and homelessness, and then their kids are like under lockdown and have to do remote learning. And so she's at that point where they just finished. They now have to finish the fine cut, and they have till December when they'll launch it at the Student Film Festival. Well, they'll showcase it at the Student Showcase here, and then launch it. But the pitch that she did and everything, all of the extraordinary material that she brought with her, all happened because of the amazing training that she had in the program. And then this was just this student pitch that I was lucky enough to get to develop for them at Double Exposure, at this film festival that fuses journalism and documentary, which is what you all are interested in. But you could see she's amazing. She's just, and it's the kind of project that you would do.
Incredible, thank you. I'm getting alerts from my colleague that we have many questions. So my last question for you from me is, this is an incredible program. There are so many practical skills that the 3 of you will instill in your students. What makes for a good application? What are you looking for whenever you're reviewing applications for this program? You can start whenever you'd like. June, we'll start with you. We'll just make the rounds.
I'm looking for people who are curious about the world. I'm less interested in those that want to tell their personal stories. I generally like to send those folks to the film school, which does not have a documentary program, but you can make a documentary during one of the, it's 3 years over there instead of 1 year. And then you have to do a thesis film. So curiosity about the world and an ability to write and express oneself. Those are my 2 highest things. Somebody who is current on the news, and less so the folks who want to go out and do, want to change. We all want to change the world as journalists, but like if you have like one issue that like, this is my issue and this is all I want to do, we want to stretch you to get out of your comfort zone. So anytime you just want to like, I want to stay in this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Unless you're like, we did admit a couple of people like that last year. I'm not sure if they came in, but we really want you to stretch yourself, because if you're only working in your comfort zone, you're not really learning something. You learn when you have to work, interact with people you don't know, go into communities that you didn't want to go into or thought might be scary. So we really want to, I'm looking for people who are willing to stretch.
Amazing. Thor?
Yeah, just to add on to June, I think the 2 key things for me, well, one is, yeah, you have to want to be a journalist. You have to want to do reporting. And reporting means that you want to look into a topic or subject and get really deep and challenge your assumptions and challenge your own sort of beliefs going in. As opposed to, do you want to do advocacy work? Because if you want to do advocacy work, then this definitely isn't the place for you, because I think it will be quite frustrating, because you're going to run up against that reporting issue that's going to be required and demanded of you. And there are lots of places, there are a few places that definitely do advocacy documentary work. And so that's the first thing, just to add on to June, like you really have to want to do reporting. And that's a myriad of different things, like June was saying, going into different communities. And I just think really challenging yourself. And then the second part is you Yes, there are a lot of transferable skills with documentary filmmaking, whether it's shooting or editing or just being a really good reporter and writer. But you have to want to make a film. If you're sort of like on the fence of like, yeah, I think video is cool and I like watching documentaries, then I would just challenge to think about like, is this really what you want to do? Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work while you're at Columbia. It's a lot of work after you graduate. It's a lot of work in your first film. It's a lot of work on your 15th film. It's a lot of work. It takes a commitment to the craft and to yourself and to the story. So those are my two main things. Yeah.
Thank you.
But
And Judith?
hopefully we get to see you.
Well, I haven't read any of the proposals. I was told that I'm going to be asked to be on that committee, but I have never read any of them. But I can only echo what's already been said. So if you want to get to the questions, you should do that. But I mean, I think if you're committed to democracy and you're committed to free speech and you're committed to the ideals that that make living in our nation or any nation a just place to be, and you see that storytelling and reporting are part of those principles, I think that that's really an important thing to be able to write and talk about right now.
Perfect, thank you. And Ross, we'll start with some questions.
Right, thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for the great questions in the chat. I guess the first few are about the master's project itself. And I think the first one I'll ask is about whether students can go and team up and do a story mainly in the New York area, or could people go further afield in the US or even abroad to do their documentary project?
Yeah, I can take that. Just by the logistical constraints that we're working in, you have 52 weeks to learn everything and make a film. And also we don't really teach parachute journalism. We teach in-depth reporting, and part of that is, with the character-driven stories, getting to know the people in your film. Not that you're going to become best friends, but just getting to know them to where there's a comfortable line of communication. So a majority of the reporting does take place in the tri-state area. That said, we've had many films that have incorporated travel, whether it's within the United States or internationally. That can be a really great component to your story and to your film, if there is that natural connection. For instance, Guanajuato Norte is about a migrant farmer in Connecticut. So they spent a lot of time on this farm and got to know Winnie, that's his name. And through their reporting, they found out that he was doing it to support his family back home, which is sort of obvious, but what they found out was that his daughter was graduating from architecture school in Mexico that summer. So they traveled with him to Mexico to meet the family, to see the graduation and see the payoff for his decades of hard work of being separated from his family. So that's a great example of how international travel can work in.
Great, thanks, Thor. And then another question about, in terms of resources, I think in terms of equipment and all the things, are the students given all the necessary equipment to do all the storytelling and to potentially travel as well?
Yes, short answer. Yes, you get all the equipment. You get about, we
We'll
figured
give you
it out one year, we get about $80,000 worth of in-kind services from us in terms of the cameras, the editing equipment, the software to do the editing. We have a limited number of scholarships and grants available for people to do travel. And each team also gets a stipend to work on their master's project.
Great. In terms of careers, I had a question about networking. Do students get the chance to meet with other documentarians, other producers, and learn how to make connections with places like Frontline or with Netflix and those kinds of places during the program?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
All
mean,
those people come to the school. Go ahead, Thor.
yeah, I mean, traditionally, next year, we don't know what next year is going to look like, but yes, the journalism school has journalists, filmmakers coming through it all the time. Judith had mentioned a double exposure film festival. We bought passes for the current class and last year's class to attend it virtually. We've taken classes down to DC a few times. We buy passes for Doc NYC. we buy passes for documentary screenings with filmmakers. It's part of what we think is really important. It goes back to what Judith was saying about building a community. It's vital. The documentary world is big, but it's also really small. Everybody sort of knows everybody. And if you don't know somebody, you know somebody who does know them. And that all starts through going to these events and networking and not being shy and talking. As June said, she pitched her first film to Frontline in an elevator. That's so true. You just never know who you're going to meet at one of these events. And it's going to be somebody you collaborate for years to come or 5 years down the road, you know. So yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And another question about people who are really interested in doc, but maybe want to explore some other areas of journalism while they're at the school. Are there opportunities to, say, explore audio or other types of storytelling, even though you're in the documentary specialization?
Yes.
Yeah, so Brett Forrest, who graduated, he's graduating this December. He just finished in August. So he did doc, obviously. He also did Radio Workshop, which is kind of like an all things considered show for those of you who are familiar with NPR in the States. And over the summer through that class, he connected with Sally Herships and he worked on her series called, what was it called? The Heist. It came out. It's a series on an investigative podcast series about Trump money. And it came out about a month ago and it's done really, really well. So there's a recent example of somebody who really took on both. We always have students, it seems like every year, who's in Sam Friedman's book writing class as well. And, you know, it speaks to their ambition because they're two really hard classes, Radio Workshop, book writing. And if you're doing that while you're doing doc, you know, it's ambition, but they always make it through.
Mm-hmm. Great. And now in terms of the, sorry, was it someone else?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that there's also these, like Joanne teaches a podcasting class, and they do this shoe leather. It's kind of a collective thing where they produce all these wonderful pieces that are then on a platform. And, you know, if you Google it, I think that you'd be able to see it, but you really do learn all these amazing, there's amazing opportunities that have deadlines that are built into it. So you could still be doing your doc and you learn these skills that become not only ways for you to be able to work with doc makers in lots of different ways or work in the nonfiction world in other ways, but it all relates back to making a stronger film or a stronger package around your film.
Thanks. And then speaking of the application, I know we talked a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of what people want to do in terms of storytelling in this particular program. Someone had a question more about what you're looking for, like in a portfolio that someone might be submitting as part of their application. What kind of content or what kind of things do you look for in that regard?
I think that, you know, there's this thought that you have to know how to make video and be an accomplished videographer and editor. I mean, while that may help, it's definitely not necessary. I think it goes back to the original of like, do you want to learn this craft? Do you want to be a reporter and a journalist and really dedicate yourself to those two areas of what we teach? Those are the most important things. Look, if you know how to shoot and edit, that's great. But it's definitely not a requirement. And you know, as June said, is like, can you write? And are you curious? So I think that, you know, I don't know, is there really anything else to add, June, other than that? I mean, that's really what we're looking for is like, can you write and tell a story and convince us that you really want to be a journalist and a doc filmmaker? That's.
And it's not like you have to come in knowing how to do all this stuff. We do train you.
Yes.
So it's not like we're looking for people who've already done all this. You know, I mean, we had a student in this last year's class who came in and was sort of a little bit lost about how to approach all of this, you know, but I mean, it's a school, we train you how to do this stuff. Now, the big difference between, I would say, learning journalism and the experience you've had in if you have a graduate degree already or an undergraduate school, is that this is my distillation of it, is generally in undergraduate school and in high school, all the way through school, you've basically had to answer multiple choice questions. There is always a right answer. In the Graduate School of Journalism, there is no right answer. You have to go out and prove to me that your thesis is correct. And I'm going to challenge you on whether or not it's correct. And I'm going to want you to to report against your own thesis. You know, like we did a story on, I just finished a film on voter suppression. I spent easily half of my time talking to people who think that there is a serious problem with voter fraud in this country. I learned about the history of where they came from. I wanted to understand how they arrived at the conclusions they've arrived at. If I don't understand that, I can't do the story that explains why this issue is so important. So you need to be willing to do that. It's part of the process.
I'm going to follow up. Oh, sorry, Judith.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, I always tell people when they're writing out their bios or they're, you know, or in a proposal, don't be, or they're applying to a fund, the chicken and egg fund, like, don't be afraid to say who you really are. Like, it actually might be more interesting to be able to say, up until this point, I've been a firefighter, or up until this point, I've been a plumber, or, you know, I raced cars, I did this and I did this. And it's only now I'm realizing I really want to write and I really want to make films. And that might be so much more interesting than I've been studying to do this my whole life, because it's like you are a character too. You have a point of view. You come from somewhere. You have a zip code. You have life experience. So I think the way for you to be able to talk about your life experience and your point of view and what has shaped you are really important things. And you want to bring that into your into the inquiry that you're committed to, I think is really, really important. I'm always interested in people who have a really different background and who did something else beforehand.
Great. Well, it looks like we're about to hit our end time for this. So you can always follow up with us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu with more questions about this program or anything else you want to know about Columbia Journalism School. And I'll turn this back over to John.
All right, thanks so much, Ross. And thank you all for your tremendous questions. And thank you, June, Thor, and Judith, for your amazing talent and for sharing all of your wisdom with our prospective students and people who are interested in the program. We'll be having events coming up. This has been recorded, so you can also watch it again. If there's anything that you want to listen to, lots of wisdom here. So thank you all so much and have a great day.
Can I give one shout out? Evan, your frame looks amazing, by the way. Yeah, you, Evan. Such a great shot. That was it.
Very cool. All right. Thank you all.
Alrighty. I just put my email on the chat, so if you want to reach out. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, remember, copy the chat. There's good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Very true. Thank you all.